I'm delighted to be here with you today. I'm Eliza Tudor, Executive Director of Nevada County Arts Council, and we are the administrative lead for the service area that comprises 19 counties in Northern California. And California Arts Council call this region Upstate California for the purposes of this grant. And I'm delighted to welcome Liz and Tamara. Tamara, and Liz, do you want to make yourselves known to the group?
Hello.
Hello. My name is Tamara Wickma. I am a coach and consultant with Live True Wholeness, and excited to be working on this project with Upstate Creative Corps through the connection of Friends of the Arts up in Butte County. So I'm excited to be here and share these connection points and this information here with Liz, who's very knowledgeable, and my partner in crime, or my partner in shine here today.
I love it. I also love the way you call it corpse, because it sounds sort of deathly. We just call it core. Anyway, it's great to have you with us, Liz and Tamara. And I'm just literally going to hand over to you. We're all busy people, and so I'm going to recommend you go. Jessica and Eve, I'm not sure if you had questions, but your hands are still raised, so you might want to click on that reactions button. Welcome everybody. Liz and Tamara, over to you to create, enlighten us about the budget process.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I do need sharing capabilities so I can share the presentation.
Yes, you do.
And as I mentioned, my name's Tamara. I'm up here in Machuptamaidu territory, Butte County, and have come to share this presentation with Liz. And we're going to get that started here in a moment. Just so you know, we're going to do our best to cover this information in the next 45 minutes. That's the intention for these mini workshops, is that they're short and sweet and impactful. So we'll probably cover the bulk of it in the first bit of time, and then leave some time for questions and answers at the end. So please share your questions in the chat. So I'm going to do my best to keep track of those and weave those in towards the end. And yeah, I think that's it. Here we go. Also, I guess one other thing is that this is one of 2 mini sessions we're going to be offering, which will remind that at the end. We're going to be doing one with the rubric and how to connect the dots of your proposal with the rubric and the evaluation, and date what that has been moved. And so we'll talk about that at the end. So this is, again, more of a general concept on how to develop your Upstate Creative Core project budget. And so hopefully this will be applicable for the 3 different tiers. Obviously, as it gets more up those tiers, there's going to be more detail needed, because the sum of money and the relationships and projects you're working with are going to be larger. So for today, what we're going to be covering is tips for creating a strong budget, what it means to be practical, realistic, and detail-oriented as we talk about the budget itself, links to the budget tightly to the project objectives, activities, and timelines. So we're going to be sharing some of the materials that have been made by the Upstate California Creative Corps. So those will be shared here. We'll review the list of non-fundable items, budget items, so to be very aware when you're writing your budget, things that are going to be funded and things that will not. How to connect sustainability with your project, because there's a big component in this in the application. And so wanting to show you where those pieces present themselves and help give you some creative ideas in addressing that. And then time for questions and answers. And then next steps as far as the follow-up mini session, and then just bringing back awareness of the office hours and other opportunities to work with Upstate California Creative Corps, because the goal is really to give as much support as possible so that people that are, this is their first time grant writing, or if you're an experienced grant writer, that you were getting the needs met. Is there anything that you want to mention, Eliza or Liz?
We somehow are not able to see a screen.
Yes, I was just gonna bring that to your attention. Thank you, Liz.
You can't see a screen.
No, and I'm trying to share mine and it says that the
It's
screen
paused.
sharing is disabled.
It says your screen sharing is paused. So I can stop sharing and I can try sharing again.
So Eliza, I wonder if you're in your office, you can.
Can you see anything now? No, it just says your screen sharing is paused. I don't.
Yeah, why don't you unshare it and let me try to share mine.
Okay.
But-
Thank you. Technology, fun times.
So much fun. Here we go. This little one, I think.
Yep.
Nope, that didn't do
Oh.
it.
Yeah, I see it.
Do you? Fantastico. Okay.
Amazing. I have no idea why mine wasn't working.
So I'm just putting up what Tamara just went through, just so you can take a look. I won't say it again, but this is basically our agenda, what we're going to be covering today. So I'll give you a couple minutes to just, or a minute, 35 seconds, see what we're doing. And then we'll jump in. So in talking about budgets in advertising this workshop, Eliza had put down that budgets should be practical, realistic, and detail oriented. And as someone who's been writing grants for 25 years, I think that's a great three terms to encapsulate what you should try to do in your budget. And so that's sort of how we've structured today's session. We're going to go through it. So practical, that could mean a whole lot of things, but for me, it means building on or leveraging the strengths, connections, and knowledge or lived experience of artists and culture bearers in developing your plan. What does realistic look like in a budget? It looks like taking on something that you can reasonably expect to accomplish with the money, the time, and the personnel that you have. So one example of that would be, could you, with this particular grant in 1 year, expect to eliminate hunger throughout Butte County? Probably not within the scope of what can be done. But would it be possible to identify 1 or 2 food deserts in the community of Chico and implement some sort of a pilot program to address nutrition and low-cost healthy meals? That would be a more likely scope of work. So that to me is a realistic type of project. Then most of the rest of what we're going to be talking about is detail oriented, because even though the budget form that we have to work with is deceptively simple, which is great for first-time grant writers, but it's also maybe more difficult because it could tempt you to not include the level of detail that's going to make your project more fundable. So what does detail oriented look like? For one thing, it means just being really, really, really specific. So when you're describing the artist's role in the project, for example, the rate of pay, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Be as specific as possible, not just artist $10,000, but you might want to break it up by how long they're going to be working, like $100,000 for their $120,000 for the year, divided into 12 monthly stipends. You might want to give it by a rate of pay. You might want to do it by the project that they're working on. But just be specific in how you arrived at the budget amount that you did. Secondly, be sure that each requested expense that you have links back somehow to a project outcome or activity. So if you're asking for paint, there should be something in there that requires paint. You know, someone who's painting a mural, obviously, or anything else that they'd be painting. Third tip is use actual costs as much as possible rather than rounding out. And if possible, even put in taxes and insurance, taxes and shipping. And what this shows the funder, I believe, is that you've really thought the whole project through. So you could say paper, $25, but you could say 5 reams of paper at $4.92 per ream, including taxes, is $24.60. And that may seem like not much of a difference.
Liz, can I suggest that you go to view and click slideshow And that way it's much bigger.
Better?
That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent.
All right, thanks, sorry.
No worries.
I was a grant writer, not a tech person. What can I say? Fourth tip is carefully describe each artist's role in the project. Remember that 80% of your budget goes to the artists. So their roles and responsibilities should be delineated carefully, both here and in the project narrative. And sort of related to that is something that came up on the office hours yesterday that Eliza's office held. And that is there's the 80% that goes to artists, and there's 20% that goes to administrative costs. So there could be some things on the administrative side, like you're responsible for collecting data and documenting your process. So if you do that by someone in an office just tallying up different kinds of, the number of times people have been to meetings and things like that, that's not necessarily a very creative, I mean, it's fine and it's a good way to document, nothing against that, but that would go on the 20% side. But if you're documenting your project by having someone who creates documentaries, film documentaries, for example, come in and actually follow the course of your project and create a final product that shows what it was that you accomplished. And Eliza, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understood from yesterday's session is that could potentially, if it's described clearly that this person is an artist working with the project, could go into the 80% section of the budget for a creative person.
Absolutely, because what they're doing is creative. It is artistic, and they are a human being that needs to be paid for it. So that definitely goes in the top part of the budget for artists, under artist fees.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Okay, and then now I can't see my notes, Tamara. So was this you? Was this?
Yes. So this is just helping to draw the connection of how to write a strong budget. So these tips are that we're continuously reminding you that the budget needs to be tightly connected to the project objectives. Those are those 4 that were mentioned in the last Grant 101 workshop. Correct me if I'm wrong. There's 4. There's public health, civic engagement, and then there's 2 others.
Environment and social justice.
And social
justice. Those are the 4 goals.
Oh, those are the 4 goals, right? So when you're connecting those goals, you have your project objectives underneath those goals as those relate. So we want to make sure that those are connected and that you are tightly when in the budget narrative and then in the notes box, making those connections so that there's not any needing to guess on the part of the evaluators and the rubric readers to know that you're making that connection. The budget doesn't stand alone. Like the people who are reading your project and your proposal need to be able to make those connections simply, and that's why you're making those connections for them in those narratives. So we're going to go through a couple of the forms, I believe, here in a moment, and they may look like they're simple, but we want you to continue to be thinking about how are you going to be writing the connection. I think we're going to have some examples here in a little bit of how to write the examples of connecting your budget items back to your project objectives. And then also a big piece, as mentioned before, is around sustainability and what's going to happen to any of the items that may be remaining after the time period of the grant funding is ended. So here is the descriptions for some of the different categories in the application. And we just wanted to share this with you all so that you have eyes on understanding the different word counts and character counts for some of these different areas. So we have the 3 different tiers: the individual artists and cultural bearers or small groups, the community residency, and then the regional multi-county on the left-hand side. And then across the top, We have the different categories within the application. And so when you're looking at these, it's to bring awareness around the project summary, the project description, the accessibility, key people, relationships to key people, and the mentorship relationships, that there's actually word counts on these things. And so when we're asking you to like create these narratives of drawing the connection of your budget items, it's also bringing awareness that you have to be concise and clear with your words in, you know, a relatively quick fashion about what these connections are, because there's going to be a number of them, you know, being read. And so just helping you to be aware as you're writing, write as robustly as you'd like, but then go back and really follow the word requirements, because generally in the next workshop, we'll talk about this, but following those rubrics and those requests are kind of what gets weeded out towards the beginning if people are not falling within those requests. So is there anything else that anybody else wants to add as far as talking about these word counts?
I'm going to jump in with one quick thing. Part of the reason we're showing this to you is just to emphasize again the importance of getting as much information into your budget, including in the budget notes box, in a detailed form as possible, because as you can see, project description for the first 2 tiers has 1,000 words, which is about 4 double-spaced pages if typed or word processed. And that includes how you create awareness around the project goals, who the project will serve, intergenerational learning aims, how it will impact communities and the health of communities. So you're discussing need in there, how you know it's successful, so what your outcomes are, how you're going to be collecting data to document it, and a detailed timeline. So all of that fits into 4 pages. So you have to be super concise, but if you can supplement that with information in the budget narrative, you'll be more successful at really capturing the robustness of your project.
Thank you, Liz.
Any
And
questions at this point, or?
I also wanted to ask Eliza if there's anything about the budget notes section that they need to know as far as word counts or things you'd like to be taken into consideration in that area.
Sorry.
No, not at all. Yes, great to have this available to see now. If you just put that in, share this in exactly slideshow mode for a moment. And then go to that one. Just to say, at the base of the budget form that is there for you to complete on our online application portal, you'll see that there's an open text box where you can create notes if you feel, so say you haven't been able to, you feel that you haven't been able to succinctly describe the line item, the budget line item, you can qualify that in the space below in your budget notes, and that will help. And what I would suggest is that between your individual budget notes, you just leave a space. So essentially, you just want to make it as easy as possible for the panelists who are reviewing your applications to understand what those notes refer to within the budget above it. Does that make sense? Keep it really simple, but it just gives you some extra space.
Perfect, thank you. And I just want to add, there was a question about the cost of materials and where that would be included in the budget. And so just so in case there's any other questions and people that didn't see that in the chat, it would, from what I'm reading from Daniela's response, is that that would be included in the 20%. So the 80-20, 80% needs to go to the artists in whatever capacity that they're working to be paid. And then the 20% is for administration and for material supplies, those sort of things.
Perfect.
Here's another good question. Is the application cut people off when they get to the word count on it, or are they going to need to keep track of that?
I can speak to that.
Okay.
And So within my recommendation is to bring your text within a different application, within a different platform before you enter within your application. In the application text box, it will allow you to go over the word count. However, when you click next, it will highlight in red that your word count is off. So it will let you know. However, it won't stop you from going over the word count. And this is something that we've talked to, the technical team, and there's no way around it. So my recommendation is just get your word count from like a different, word, for instance, before you bring it into the platform.
Good recommendation. Thank you. And I don't believe that there's a requirement for the application to be double spaced within the application. I think that was just a reference for people to understand how much writing the equivalent is of the 1,000. So just for that question. And then if there's specific questions about the cost of what category things should fall into, I think that those are a good place to go is the office hours if there's specific questions. But there is just one more I want to reference was about gas and traveling. Again, that would probably be in the 20% because it's not paying an artist specifically. So that is if there's questions like that, though, there are office hours on a regular basis that can be found on the website, correct, Eliza?
Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. Ask your question again, Tamara.
The office hours, when are those for people to check in if they have specific questions about their own budget?
Absolutely.
Share the link.
So Gianna is going to share the link to register for those office hours. And once you've registered once, it means that you'll have the same link for every single week. Every single week, every single Tuesday at midday, we offer an opportunity for you to show up and ask questions. We also have an email that you can write to, info@creativecore.org. And Gianna, you can share that link as well, so you can send us your questions that way. But yes, do use those office hours all the way through to the deadline, which is April the 28th at 11:59 p.m. How many times have I myself been writing grants at 11:58?
Sort of normal grant writer thing to do.
It's like a universal law for, in relation to creativity, isn't it?
Yes,
It is.
absolutely. That late night hour. So
I'm going to jump in on Eve real quick if I can on her question, whether hours for writing this grant could be counted and what category they'd fall under. We're going to talk about what is allowable and not allowable later. So short answer is no, for two reasons. One is you can't count anything or fund anything that starts prior to the grant start period, which I believe is now June 24th. And secondly, because grant writing is not an allowable expense. And we'll get into that in just a wee bit.
awesome. Thank you. And we're going to go over the forms that we're talking about here in a moment, the budget form. And yes, somebody asked if what we're asking about for the descriptions is more in the narrative, the note parts versus in the actual budget. Like just use the item, be short and sweet in the budget. But when you're connecting that explanation in the notes, then you can be a little bit more, use that connection. So, so be specific about costs and how you calculate them. This is where you're using the budget notes box to write in these details. Again, you're not writing it actually in the spreadsheet aspect of it, but below in the notes. And these are just some good examples on how that might look. So a so-so answer might be studio rental if you're using that for an art exhibition. And then a better response would be a studio rental, private studio at the address, how much it is a month times how many months you intend to use it. So that's better because you're having more information, you're having the calculations of the amount per month. The grant readers are seeing that you've put the effort into locating where this place is. It's not just an idea, it's helping it be more tangible. And then even better is studio rentals for artists who create works for exhibitions. Studio space will also be used for monthly collaboration with XXX for intergenerational learning component. And again, that would be a good piece for the notes. You could still use like a shortened way for the inside the budget spreadsheet. But again, it's including the month, how much it is a month, and how many months. So it's building that out. Now, this is what the budget form looks like, and Liz is going to help go through this.
So this, you probably, most of you seen this already. Oops, sorry, keep doing that. Back.
Liz, in order to navigate from one slide to another, when you're in slideshow, you just click your arrow key to the, your arrow key.
Oh, all right, thank you. I will try that next time. So this is the basic budget template is where the main information, the basic information goes into. So the artist name, the role and project. I'm not sure how large these cells expand. Eliza, do you have that information? So how much, in other words, how much information could they put to role in project here versus in the budget notes?
That's a great question. I will find out and we'll have that information in our follow-up email, to which we also attach this presentation. So I noticed that there are a couple of questions about that. We will be sharing this presentation afterwards and we'll answer that question in the email.
Okay, great. So, but essentially that's the role and project would be the one place that you might want to have a little more detail, but number of staff, rate of pay, and then the amount you're requesting from Upstate Creative Core would all go here.
Would it be helpful, Liz? We've had, we continue to have a couple of questions, and this relates to an applicant's familiarity with the online application. And our recommendation will continue to be, even if you're not yet inputting your application, your narrative questions and your budget onto the online portal, do familiarize yourself. So start an application, even if you're not using it practically until the very end, just so that you understand, you become familiar with where to find, for example, downloads and things like that. For this moment, Liz and Tamara, would it be helpful if Gianna shared her screen and showed you where to find this within the application portal? Would that be helpful?
I believe so. I'm seeing questions about that.
Sweet. Okay, so I'm gonna, Gianna, I'll mute myself and over to you with that. Are you ready for that?
Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Okay, so for me to share the screen, Liz, you have to stop sharing, and then I can share the screen and show how to get to the budget form within the application portal.
Alrighty.
And where it can be downloaded from, because I know there's a lot of questions. And please, everybody, don't judge all my windows that are open right now. So, this is
What is so many windows?
Can you mute, Eliza? So, if this is from the applicant point of view, and we have, once you are within the application, there's all these stages here, these 4 stages. So if you actually click on the budget form, so you can move from one stage to the next. And this is where you can move. Once you click on one of those stages, you go to the left-hand side here, and you can move from one stage to the next. But do keep in mind that for you to move to the next page within each of these stages, you have to complete all of the fields. But you can move over to the left here to the different stages. So if you go to the budget form, you click on that, and you will come in here and you fill it out. I don't know why it's not letting me. It's something within my application, but if you click on these 3 dots here, you can download the budget form as a PDF, and you could have that as a resource. So it's just basically like a printable version of the PDF. But within here, for some reason, my application, something happened, but you should be able to just go in each field here and fill this out electronically. So you're not downloading the budget form, filling it out and uploading it. It's actually all happening in here. Does that help?
I think that was great. Thank you.
Okay. So back to you now, Tamara and Liz.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liz. Do you want to share the screen?
Yes, I do, except
I'm seeing some other questions about the maximum amount of artists and if artists can be paid at their rate of pay that includes their materials and their equipment. I believe that, there is flexibility in some of these budget items and how they are written and described in your narrative, but ultimately coming to the office hours and having conversations with Eliza and Deanna to get those answered is probably going to be the best, or emailing directly with these questions. I don't know if that works as well, Deanna and Eliza, but the idea is to get as many artists, paid for their services and talents and connecting it to the goals of this grant. So if you have ways to do that beyond 12 and you can connect the proposal narrative to what you're doing, then I would say do that. And Brian, did you have your hand up? Okay, you are a email right now, I think. You have something on your head, dinosaur?
Yeah, so it's not letting me download the page as a PDF. It's making me download it as a .rar file.
Your microphone coming through is really, really muffled, or something going on, so I can't really hear you.
Oh, give me a minute.
Still
Do I
have,
sound good now?
you sound better, but not really clear.
to hear.
Oh, but yeah, so it's not letting me download the file as a PDF. It's making me download it as a .rar file, and then my computer is telling me that it is going to it's like a virus, and yeah, I don't know if I downloaded the correct thing.
Yeah, I don't know. That sounds like it shouldn't have been doing that. So, Deanna, do you want to respond to that?
Brian, would you please share your email with me, and then I can just send you a PDF as an attachment?
Okay, it's here, let me find it. I don't have my Gmail open right
You
now.
can just share it in the chat, so we can just keep.
Here, wait, I have it. It is mmart6641@gmail.com.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
And also maybe just sit in the chat just in case you can get all of those letters in there. Deanna, maybe we could also send that out with the recording to people and maybe have it somewhere maybe easily more accessible. It shouldn't be an issue, but thanks, Brian. Okay, we got a little bit more time together, a few more things to cover. So Liz, do you want to pop that?
I could go next. There's a couple more questions that we could. Carrie,
Yeah.
I'm just looking at your question right now, Carrie, for show about artists often include materials and equipment use into their hourly rate of pay. And
Reference that.
you talked about that already?
Yeah, I just mentioned that if they can make the narrative connection in their proposal and in their notes, that I think that they're Eliza and Deanna are open to that creative connection, but they need to be able to make it in the writing. And
Yeah.
If they have any specific questions, come to the office hours or email would be the best, so that we can move forward.
I do just want to field, because there are so many of us, I don't want sort of a large number of people to go away with any misunderstandings, specifically about the number of artists that can be included in a single application. So in grant category 1, which is the application that you would be completing if you are either a solo artist working alone or an artist leading an application for a small group. My recommendation is to not to push it too much over, say, 6 artists. In the other categories, grant categories 2 and 3, that's the community residency, you know, the sky's the limit, or the multi-county application. Partly that's because it becomes challenging if you're a solo artist applying either on, you know, on behalf of a small group of you. It becomes challenging understanding how what the relationships will be, and as well as the capacity to actually complete your scope of work with the monies that you have. Yes, I hope that helps. It's really designed for, initially grant category number 1 was just going to be for solo artists, but we expanded it because we felt that in many of our communities, it felt like an organic thing for artists, small groups of artists to be working together.
Yes, thank you so much, Eliza, for that clarification.
And then moving forward, there's a list that is you can access from the Upstate California Creative Corps website. It comes from the California Arts Council of what we do not fund. And I pulled out some key things, not all of them. Some of them that are in there are former grantee organizations that were not in compliance with their former grants. You can read the whole list, but these are the main ones I think that will be applicable to you. So as I mentioned earlier, no expenses before the start date, which is June 26, 2023, or
Nick,
after.
Can you
Yeah.
share? Can you share what you're
Not
looking at?
sure. Dang it. You see it now?
Nope.
No.
You have to
Go to-
share the screen at the base, Liz.
I'm doing that, but I wonder if it's,
Let me try mine and see if it works.
Yeah.
Great. And then if you go into
Yeah.
if you go into
Yeah.
slideshow mode, yeah.
Oh, but it paused. It's not showing you anything, is it?
so I wonder when I unshared my screen, if something happened.
Oh, that's hilarious. I don't know why it's doing that. Because you can see it, but the minute I hit slideshow, it's not going to show it.
Okay, let's see.
Would you like me to try?
Yeah,
You see this now?
that sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you all for your patience and sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now tell me where you want me to go.
So go to slide number 10, please. Yes, excellent.
Got it?
It's not happening.
I don't see it.
Okay.
There must be a Google presentation, something happening there. Because
Yes, I think it probably is. So what about if I just, yeah, no, it's not letting me. I'll go back into it
Okay.
again.
See, this must be crazy, but this.
too much of a reflection and we can't see it at the angle.
Can you see now?
Yeah.
Yes, can see.
Yeah.
Can see.
Okay, I'm not going to put it in slideshow mode. It has something to do with that. So let's just leave it here for now, and we'll share this later for anyone who's having trouble seeing the screen, for example, if they're on their iPhone or whatever.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So no expenses before the start date or after the end date. So that's from June 26, 2023 to June 25th, 2024. All expenses should supplement but not supplant. So if you're getting any funding from the state for anything, You can't use this funding to replace it, thereby freeing up state funds. Don't know that this is going to be the case for many people, but it's a very common thing within grants. So supplementing would be adding on to an existing program or starting a new program. Supplanting, as I said, would be paying for something that's already being paid for or covered. No expenses for hospitality, meals, or food are allowable. You can't pay for grant writing or fundraising expenses. Can't pay for capital expenses or construction projects. And no equipment purchases. Equipment, you can buy supplies, you can buy material, but my understanding yesterday from speaking with Don was that equipment for purposes of this grant is something that lasts longer than the lifespan of the grant itself.
We know this is frustrating, and we as administering organization in our role as a county arts agency often feel frustrated with this because we're trying to build capacity, aren't we? All of us are who work for nonprofits. So sometimes the cost of renting ultimately is more than the cost to actually purchase the piece of equipment. It's frustrating, we know. So we just wanted to share with you how frustrating that might seem to you. And we're all in this together, but that's what California Arts Council state.
And I've been encouraged that there are ways where people, there are ways that you can find a way to make it work for, so just to reach out to your people.
And yes, you can rent equipment.
Absolutely.
That's allowable, just not the purchase. And hospitality, what if the artist is a culinary artist? Does that qualify as hospitality? I would think that would be an artist, no? It
depends. It depends whether the culinary artist is providing for, is feeding the crew or whatever, then it's not allowed. We felt frustrated when we did our 19 county listening tour in advance of launching our program. We were working very long days and going to many different destinations that we wouldn't be going to were it not for this particular grant. So we felt it seemed reasonable in order to pay for meals, for example, for ourselves, sustenance, but that isn't allowed. So you can rest assured that we are not using our creative core funds to feed ourselves. But I'm not sure whether the question actually related to the idea of a culinary artist as part of the creative process, or
if you have a moment, I can clarify on it just to get a clear answer, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So it would be an artist we hire on who is feeding the community. It wouldn't be feeding the staff, it would be feeding the community at our weekly support groups. So this is giving back to the community through the art of culinary nourishment and expression.
I am so sorry. I think the answer is still no. I think it is because it's still a form of catering, and it's so wonderful. My suggestion would be to find matched funds for that. That's what we do a lot. Is try to find a different funding source for that particular, because we recognize that so often food is a social and much needed nourishment that brings people together and breaks ice, and is very much necessary. So we understand, and thank you for asking.
Thank you.
I would also throw in there that we're about to talk about sustainability and how important that is. And so if there were a way that you could, if anybody were able to donate the cost of food or hospitality or something like that, then to wrap that into your overall narrative, that speaks to sustainability. It shows that there's somebody else from an outside source that is also willing to invest in this. And so even though that doesn't help in terms of the budget, it ultimately would strengthen the project.
Sure. We have a lot of local donors who donate meals, and then we have volunteers who cook as well. I was just wondering if we could one day pay those volunteers, but we can outsource for how we can do that at a different place. Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate it.
No, absolutely, Misty. And just the fact that you're thinking that way it's sort of like the power of leverage. So make sure we know about that in your application. That's a very beautiful thing.
Will do.
Okay, so next slide, please.
There's a few questions about if gas and travel can be allowable expenses, I think within reason, and if it's included in the 20%, is the answer to that. Correct, Eliza?
Say that one more time. I'm so sorry, Tamara.
It's okay. The gas and travel, it can be included in the 20%.
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay. A couple other questions were, people are asking about rates of pay and if there's any suggestions, or maybe that can be put into the Q&A part on the website. I think might be helpful for people to have general ideas of what there might be as far as suggested amounts. I mean, clearly there's a large range, right, depending on artists and their skill and what they're doing and what industry they're in artistically. So I don't know that this would be an end all be all decision making, but maybe some recommendations for people who are newer to that idea.
I'm so grateful that you brought this up. We've deliberated long and hard about whether to be prescriptive as to the hourly or lump sum rate, if you like, for an individual artist. There are just too many differentials. So, for example, the going rate in Los Angeles for an artist, for an hourly rate, can't correspond. We can't pluck these rates out of thin air because the cost of living in different places varies so much. Even within the county that I come from, Nevada County, there's a 10% difference in the cost of living from one end of the county to the other. We've left this to you. If you feel unsure about it, then reach out to us or put a note in the budget. Like, if you feel that the panel is going to see what your hourly rate of your artist is that you're asking for feels too high and that the panel may question it, put something in the budget notes that points to why you feel that's important. We want artists to be paid. This is a workforce development opportunity. It's very important to us that artists are paid adequately. So don't shortchange yourselves whatsoever, but perhaps provide rationale one way or the other if you think you're going too low or too high, or just get in touch with us.
Thank you so much. And there's more questions coming in than probably we're going to have answers to, but know that we're going to print this chat out afterwards, and to check the Q&A, potentially that will be emailed out to you as well, to get some of these questions answered, because there are really good questions about what artists will be included, like to just have people be able to look through that. I think the culinary artist question brought up a lot for people. And then also just the questions around who should be submitting the grant letters. If you're in a category 2, that was a good question. If there's any restrictions to matching funds. I'm just kind of going through those because I don't know, we're gonna have a time to explain every one of those, and those are good questions. But yes, if you're in category 2, you should be contacting the person who contacted you. I wouldn't reach out to the agency that's working in category 2 unless you are the lead artist who is working with them, just for sake of clarity around that.
Tamara, if I might just interrupt for a moment. The idea of renting equipment versus buying it. One of our team members at Upstate Creative Core came up with a fabulous idea, and I'm kind of sort of laughing about this a little bit because it's so canny. The reason it's so canny is because he's actually 3 times chair of California Arts Council. So if he says it's okay, then we are duty bound to share it with you. He suggested that someone outside the scope of the work of your project could purchase the piece of equipment that you need, rent it to the group, rent it to you, so that all that would show up in your budget is the cost of the rental, and perhaps later donate it to the agency or to the artists. And again, I say this slightly tongue-in-cheek because it comes from our beloved Don Harris, who is 3 times chair of California Arts Council. But I cannot see why there's anything wrong with that. So just find someone amazing in your community. If you want that piece of equipment, get them to purchase it and then get them to charge you rental for it and convince them to donate it to you later. Sound good? It's a creative approach.
Absolutely. Do we want to move forward with the presentation, or do we want to? Okay. I think we're on to the next slide.
We're on to sustainability. The last 4 slides I could just sort of zoom through if you want. We want to respect people's time too, though, and we're 3 minutes from
Time.
And so
Slide 11.
Yeah. So slide 11, there's no particular question in any of the prompts except for category 3, which asks about sustainability. And yet the idea of sustainability and the way the project's going to continue after the end of the grant funding period is woven through in 3 different ways. So first of all, it's included in the review criteria for all 3 categories by asking, does the project lend itself to becoming a model of best practice or a gold standard beyond the activity period? And to me, that is definitely speaking about sustainability. Second place that you can see it is in the project designs section for category 1, where one of the questions is the ability to fulfill project objectives in a sustainable manner clear from the proposal? And then if you read through the grantee requirements at the very beginning of category 3, it does call for projects with what they call a high sustainability quotient. And that is defined below. And I think you'll have access to this PowerPoint so you can read that definition. But I encourage you to read it. It comes also from the Upstate Creative Corps website, and it talks about different ways that you might show sustainability. And so if you go to the next slide, we can look a little bit at some of those. There too. So how do you demonstrate sustainability in a grant budget? One way is to note in the budget narrative, in the notes box actually, or in the project narrative itself, either one, where non-grant sources, cash or in-kind or volunteer, might support the work. This would be, there was a question earlier on from, I don't remember who, but asking about what if the travel and expenses and things that fit into the 20% come to more than 20% of the grant budget. And that came up with hospitality as well. So if they do, and if somehow you're funding or covering that in another way, you're getting donations from someone, the person who's renting you equipment or who's renting you studio space agrees to do it at a reduced rate. All of that is what they call an in-kind donation. It's not a cash donation per se, but it is a way that someone else is contributing as well to the project, which is always a good thing to show funders that other people are also interested in the project and willing to commit their time or their resources to it. And then a second way to demonstrate sustainability is to describe in the narrative any partnerships, whether they're secured already or whether they're planned, or additional funding sources. And those could be described in, next slide, please.
And I'm just going to jump in because this 20-80% ratio question is such an interesting one for us too. And so many of us administering organizations around the state have asked this of California Arts Council, that California Arts Council thought long and hard and added it in to its own FAQ for the administering organizations. The question is, and I'm going to put it here, does each subgrant have to adhere to the 80-20% artist salary project support ratio? No. This requirement must be adhered to for the aggregate re-granting, but not for each individual grant. For example, an AO may make some grants to artists entirely for their salaries and some grants to non-profit organizations that are primarily offering production, exhibition and rehearsal space, equipment usage, etc. An AO, that's an administering organization, that's us, is in compliance with this requirement as long as the overall re-granting meets the 20-80% ratio. So in other words, we, as the granting organization, are required to keep track of how much we're re-granting towards expenses, including project support, administration, equipment, rentals, all that sort of thing, in order to be able to report back this 20-80% ratio. So we encourage you to bear this in mind as you're creating your budget. But if, as you see that you fit into a category where there are naturally more that goes into that project support part, or less, bear it in mind. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Eliza. And I want to apologize for assuming that sustainability, for not defining it at the beginning. So there was a good question about what that meant. And that it just means that the work of the project or the impact of the project lasts after the funding period. You might not continue with having the same artist doing the same work at the same rate of pay, but somehow ideally you would like the work or the impact to go on. Does that make sense? Or
that it doesn't necessarily go on, but that it's somehow you can replicate it later, or that it lends itself to a model that can be borrowed by other communities later. We're very interested in developing case studies from your projects, and be thinking about that as you go forth, so that other communities with other issues can borrow what you've done so beautifully for your vulnerable communities elsewhere.
There was one other term that was used, I think, a question about re-granting, what that reference was.
Did I use the word re-grant, or was that?
I believe so.
I can't even remember the context. Forgive me, I would have to be reminded.
I think it was the 20%, 80%, and whether you had to strictly adhere to those percentages.
I see. Well, if you imagine that Nevada County Arts Council, as the administering organization for the Upstate California Creative Corps, that's close to $3.5 million. We've received that money from the state, and we're going to be re-granting that to you.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Great.
That's the re-granting you were referring to. Thank you. I think we got a couple more slides and then
2 more slides. So I'm going to zip through this one because I'd like to spend a little more time on the last one. So slide 13. We can do that. So where will the sustainability, the ongoing impact of the work show up in a grant budget, but actually it should say in the grant narrative? There are 3 places in the grant narrative that you could talk about how the work's going to be sustained. One is in accessibility, specifically because you're asked to describe the project's public component, including digital or physical accessibility. That would be a logical place if it fits with the project that you're doing. So if the public component is going to increase the visibility of what you're doing, potentially generate additional financial support or partnerships, go ahead and mention that there. I mean, if you feel that it could, or maybe it's part of your plan to make that happen. In terms of key people, consider whether any of the artists or culture bearers or agency partners that are part of your project are linked into networks of their own that might also help sustain the project. And if so, talk about it with them. I don't make promises, obviously, on behalf of someone before you've talked to them, but this is another good place to show this kind of sustainability. And even better if it's documented through letters of support from those people. And finally, in the project description, and I think we'll just move to the next slide because I think it's a better illustration of what yeah. So this is sort of a graphic view of how you tie together outcomes. So you've got your goals that Tamara mentioned at the beginning, the 4 main goals, and you choose at least one of those that you'll be addressing. And then to address that goal, let's say it's social justice and community engagement, you'll probably we are asked to identify several outcomes. So, you know, whatever those are, they're more like action, like things that you'll see at the end that will show that you're working toward that goal. And then how you're going to document progress toward those and a timeline. But what I'm suggesting here, we both are suggesting, is that you could consider including sustainability as an actual outcome. So your outcomes are going to be related to art, and related to your project, and related to everything else. But potentially, and I just put outcome 3 because I just picked a number at random, but you could say throughout project implementation, develop partnerships and identify long-term funding streams to ensure sustainability at the end of the funding cycle. So all well and good, easy to say. How are you going to do that? So then you have to think that one through. So moving to the middle column here, you're also asked to document progress to evaluate whether you're meeting the outcomes. So for outcome 3, and here's a list of just sort of some tangible artifacts that you could collect that might document that. You could decide that you're going to be having monthly meetings with your whatever collaborative you're a part of. Wow, it looks green on my screen now. Interesting. So agendas and monthly meetings, agendas and minutes, sorry, from monthly meetings, which document steps and actions taken to ensure sustainability. So if you have a structure whereby you have regular meetings, you might include sustainability or future funding sources or something like that as an ongoing agenda item at each meeting. You could have a list of potential partnerships and evidence of contacting those people. So you might keep emails, you might keep notes from conversations, you might keep letters of support from these possible partners. A list of at least 4, and again, made up number, but 4 long-term funding streams that would sustain the work. So if there's somebody has some kind of ability to research those, a grant writer or somebody that you know, and they could say, hey, have you thought about also applying to these California Arts Council opportunities or these opportunities locally with a local foundation or whatever it might be. Minimum of 2 completed applications to these funders, letter of commitment from whatever agency to provide studio space at no cost or discounted rates. These are just examples of the kinds of things that could document sustainability if you chose to include that.
Wonderful. And I'll also just mention there are so many, we know as creatives, there are so many different ways to document your process. It could be through visual art, you know, somebody's creating sketches of your process, or you're writing about it in some literary form, or you're filming it. You know, there are so many different ways. It's very normal when you are a grantee, you're awarded funding, that you write a report at the end and you're asked for support materials that show your work in progress or, you know, outcomes, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that if that helps, thanks, Liz. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's perfectly fine. And yeah, there's nothing creative showing up in this one because they were examples to document progress towards sustainability, but you're absolutely right, Eliza, that certainly a finished documentary film project that outlines the entire work is definitely would fit into an outcome for sustainability as well, I would think. And then I won't read through all of this, but then the next step of that is a detailed timeline. So if you're going to be showing these specific, the middle column objectives and ways to document your project, then when you develop your timeline, be sure that everything that you've listed as a way you're going to evaluate your project, or everything you've listed as an outcome, shows up in some way, shape, or form on the timeline. Personally, if there's room, there may not be enough room with the word count, but you'd have to just tighten the words. But I find it a lot easier as a grant reviewer, and also it's just my practice is, besides giving an activity on the timeline, like hold monthly grant steering meetings, I like to say how often they're going to be, who's responsible for it. And then you notice on here, I put outcome 3 in bold, so that a reader who's going through this can, if they're reading my timeline, ideally it would be a much longer timeline, because it would include the other work of the project. Because I'm just giving a snapshot of one outcome here. But they would be outcome 1, outcome 2, outcome 3, 4, whatever. And you can just see at a glance that, yeah, there's on the timeline, there's work being done each month or each quarter, however often, to address each of these outcomes. So that's what we got for you today.
I can see Liz and Tammy have been so amazing. I'm seeing some general questions. I am so I'm looking at Andra's question. What if outcomes are intangible and unquantifiable? So we'll be looking at evaluation of projects in different ways, both quantitatively and qualitatively. And those qualitative ways that we'll be reviewing your amazing work will be different from using data. So obviously, if you're thinking of applying to Upstate California Creative Corps, you have a vision. You just want to know what that vision is and what success looks like to you. So instead of, perhaps change the language a little bit, instead of thinking about terrifying, qualitative and quantitative outcomes, start thinking about what success looks like for you and tell us about it. And then it doesn't feel so scary. I'm seeing a question, can collaborators be from outside the state? They can, but not if you're paying them. California Arts Council wants to make sure that public monies, that's monies that come from, a tax base, are benefiting artists who come from within California. So you can work with artists who are serving your region, your county, your community, your identified community from anywhere in California, as long as you can clearly say how they're serving your region, but not from outside the state. I hope that's clear, and I hope that's understandable too. I am just seeing if there are any other questions, and Katrina, do pipe up if you think I've missed a question.
I think you did a great job. I don't know that I think between you and Diana and I in the chat, we've covered a lot of them, but I'm sure we'll go back through and just make sure. Yes, that gets covered. I do want to mention that the workshop, the mini workshop, which is, turning into a full-length workshop, is going to be on the 4th of, the 5th of April at noon instead of the 27th. So just a note for people who are planning to attend, and that is where we're going to be covering connecting the rubric to your proposal. So how the grant readers are going to be looking at your proposal. So if you want to attend, again, that date has been changed to April 5th at noon. And I'm sure there'll be a link to register.
Yes, I'll share it again here in the chat.
So Gianna's just going to share that in the chat now. Thank you very much for pointing that out. I just love to see this. I love to see all the faces that are visible to me today. And there are so many reasons why some of us can't be on video. It's because we're in rural California. We don't always have access. But I would just so love to take a screenshot of all of you because you're so gorgeous And I'm so excited about seeing your applications. This is a finite amount of money. I'm going to take a screenshot in a moment. This is a finite amount of money that Upstate Creative Corps has to work with across 19 counties. We have almost 3.4 million across 19 counties. We're going to be very sensitive in terms of how we divvy that up in an equitable way across our diverse geographies, and taking into account, you know, the degree to which each of the program goals are equitably serviced throughout our geographical region. So I hope that you trust us to be working with our local review panelists across 19 counties in a way that's really equitable. If it occurs, as it probably will, that we receive many more excellent applications for superb projects than we can fund, all this is going to be fed back to California Arts Council. All of it will impact the way that the program is evaluated. If we're telling California Arts Council ultimately that there were so many other excellent projects that we couldn't fund, not because they weren't good enough, but because the overall sum we have to grant is finite, that may impact the way legislators look at whether this should be ongoing funding. So we want to provide California Arts Council, the state agency for the arts, with as much fodder as possible to be able to make these grant monies ongoing. So let's create some beautiful projects. Don't be afraid to apply. And we're here to help on a weekly basis through our office hours. So I'm